So we're going to look now at calculating the mean from grouped data. What I mean by that is a table like this. So what I've done is I've gone and asked lots of people how many TVs they have in their house. So apparently, according to this table, 2 people had no TVs in their house, 8 people had 1 TV, 6 people had 2 TVs, 7 people had 3 TVs, and 3 people had 4 TVs. Now, before we go on to the mean, you could actually also be asked what is the modal amount of TVs, or the mode. So, can you remember what the mode means? Well, the mode is the most frequent, one that occurs the most. So I'm looking for the number of TVs though. So really, what I could have done with this table, instead of having the table, I could have had all the separate numbers just written in a list. So I could have had 0 TVs and 0 TVs and 1 TV, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and so on. So, because what I've got there is 2 zeros, I've got 8 1s, then I'll have 6 2s, alright, and so on. Now, what I could have done then is I could have looked at which number occurs the most. But rather than having all this big list, I've put it in a table to make it look slightly easier. So I'm looking for which number of TVs occurs the most. Well, actually, it's the biggest frequency is 8. So that means the modal number of TVs is actually 1. So the mode number there is 1, or the modal group, the modal amount of TVs. So that's how we can find the mode. Moving on to find the mean. Now, can you remember what the mean means and what you've got to do to find the mean? So, the mean is, if you remember, add them all up and divide by how many there are. Okay? So, what I could do with my calculator here, add them all up and divide by how many there are. If I had a list here, I could go 0 plus 0 plus 1 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 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, and so on. But the trouble is, I could easily make a mistake there as I'm using the calculator. So what I can do is I can use my table. And what I'm actually going to do here, I'm going to stick on an extra column on this table. Even though there wasn't a column there, I'm now putting a column on because I've got some space. Now if I look at this, the total number of people who have 0 TVs, well there's 2 of them, so in total that's still 0 TVs. This row here, there are 8 people who have 1 TV, so in total that's 8 TVs. Here there are 6 people who have 2 TVs, so that's a total of 12 TVs, so obviously I'm timesing through. Here there's a total of 21 TVs, and here there's a total of 12 TVs. So, what do you think I'm going to do now? Okay, so for example, this number here represents the total number of TVs for these 7 people. So now I want to know the total number of TVs, so I'm going to add this column up. So 0 and 8, that's 8, plus 12 is 20, plus 21 is 41, plus 12 is 53. Okay? Now, that's the total number of TVs, 53 TVs. So if you remember, the mean means add them all up and divide by how many there are. So, 53. A lot of people here divide by 5 because they see 5 rows. But if you divide by 5 here, you're going to get about 10, telling you that the average number of TVs is 10. But the most TVs we had was 4, so that can't be right. Add them all up and divide by how many there are. Well, it's how many people there are. So what I want to do is add that up. I want to find out how many people there are. 10, 16, 23, 26. In total, there were 26 people that were in this survey. So I actually want to do 53, total number of TVs, divided by the total number of people. So I'm going to have there 53 divided by 26, and that gives me 2.04 when I've rounded. So that's the mean number of TVs that people have, just over 2. And it doesn't need to be a whole number, it doesn't need to be an integer, but I'm looking across these numbers here, and it's in the good mix of the numbers there, so 2.03. Okay, so that's how we find mean of data from a table there. We're going to crank it up a notch here, go for something slightly harder. If we look at this question here, it says 80 patients give information about how long they waited to see the doctor. Now, this is actually from an exam paper, and notice it's question 27. So you're going to find this question well towards the back of a calculator paper. But look, notice here they've got these extra columns on as well. Sometimes they don't put extra columns on, sometimes they just leave it blank for you to put columns on and spot that you've got to do that. So 80 patients gave information about how long they waited to see the doctor. This bit here tells me how many minutes they waited. So here, this is if they waited between 0 and 10 minutes, if they waited between 10 and 20 minutes, and so on. So it tells me here that 21 people had to wait between 30 and 40 minutes. Now this is an important note to think about. If I waited for 10 minutes, which category would I go in? If I waited for 10 minutes, which category would I go in? I would actually go in this category here, 10 to 20, because that little extra line underneath means that it can be 10 minutes. That one hasn't got a line underneath it. It says that's telling me it has to be less than 10 minutes. So I would go in that one there. Just look out for those extra lines. So the question here says, work out an estimate of the mean time that the patients waited. Now, why is it only going to be an estimate? Well, that is because I don't know exactly how long these 5 people waited here. I don't know exactly how long these 22 people waited. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make an assumption. I'm going to pretend or guess that actually these 5 people waited for 5 minutes. So that's going to be in the middle of that interval there. So I'm calling that midpoint for that column there, midpoint. So I'm going to imagine these 22 people waited for 15 minutes. And the next one is going to be 25, and then 35, and then 45. Okay? So, just thinking back to here now, this question, what I did then was I found out the total number of TVs, if you like, for each row by multiplying through. I took the number and I multiplied that by the frequency. But now I'm imagining that these people had to wait 5 minutes. These 22 people had to wait 15 minutes. So if these 5 people had to wait 5 minutes, that's a total of 25 minutes for all of them. And so what I'm going to call that column there is F for the frequency times M for the midpoint. So these 22 people had to wait 15 minutes each. So 22 times 15 is 330. And the next one, 28 times 25 is 700. Total of 700 minutes for these 28 people. 21 times 35 is 735. And then 4 times 45 is 180. Okay? Now, what have I got to do next? If you look back here, what I did was I added up the total number of TVs. So that was my next job there. So now I want to find out the total number of minutes that people waited. So 25 plus 330 plus 700 plus 735 plus 180 is 1,970. Okay? So then that's the total number of minutes that people waited. Now what I want to do is I want to divide that by how many there are. So let's not fall into the trap again of dividing that by 5, because I'm going to get quite a big number from there. What am I going to divide it by? Well, I'm going to divide it by the total amount of people in it. So don't add these up, because that's just the midpoint. That would only be taking that into account once. I need to add these up, the frequency. Now if I add those up, I might need to add them up. I know they're going to come to 80. I know they're going to come to 80 because it already tells me in the question. So do be careful of that. If it tells you in the question, don't bother adding it up. So next job is, I'm going to take my total number of minutes. I'm going to divide it by the total amount of people that were in the survey. 1,970 divided by 80 equals... It's 24.6 to 1 decimal place. 24.6 minutes that they waited. And that looks about right. It's in the mix there. Quite a lot of numbers around here, so I expect it to be around there somewhere. 24.6 minutes on average people waited. Okay? So what I suggest you do is have a go at basically press pause when the question comes up. Now also don't forget, as it says here, Caleb measured the heights of 30 plants. The table gives some information about the heights and so on. So you can copy that down and have a go with it. It says work out an estimate for the mean height of a plant. You could also try and get the modal interval as well, because that does come up sometimes as well. So if you want to press pause on that question. Okay, hopefully that went pretty well. The answers will be coming up a little bit later on. Here's another question. Have a go at that. And then, again, you could also find the modal interval here. Okay, so I'm just going to give you the answers. Hopefully that's gone pretty well. Each of these are worth about 4 marks, so it's towards the end of the paper. You need to take your time on it and get it really, really right, and then of course go back and check everything else. So here's the first one that you did. So I have my midpoint, then I've got my frequency times midpoint. Hopefully you've got that. Added those up to get to 780. Frequency, I already knew it was 30 anyway. So 780 divided by 30 should give me 26 for 4 marks. Okay. If you did find the modal group, I think the modal group here would be between plants between 20 and 30 centimetres, because that's the highest frequency. Okay, next one then, this one here. So, Sathina recorded the times in minutes taken to repair 80 tyres. Information about these times is shown below. Calculate an estimate for the mean. So again, I've got my midpoints, I've got my frequency times midpoint, added them up to get 1,038. I already knew that was 80 anyway. 1,038 divided by 80 is 12.975. So I've just rounded, I've got my answer there, but I've rounded it to 2 decimal places there, 12.98. And if you did find the modal group, hopefully you found out that that's the biggest frequency, so the modal time was between 6 and 12 minutes. Okay, now if you're able to do that at the end of the exam, that's pretty good going. C grade material there.